Hello, everybody. So I'm going to stay away from politics, or at least global geopolitics. I'm going to look at the issue happening in the Champions Trophy cricket with in Pakistan, and of course India's refusal to travel to Pakistan. And so I'm going to look at that, whether that's fair, and whether the response of letting India go to Dubai for all their matches was a fair compromise. So the first thing to note is that India and Pakistan, well, it's not just a cricket rivalry, it's actually a real rivalry. They've had wars and it's never really been resolved. They haven't, yes, Pakistan separated, partitioned from India, but that's not really the end of it. It's a Muslim versus Hindu issue. There's still Muslims living in India, particularly in the south, and a lot of them want to form their own country. South of India, we've already got Pakistan and Bangladesh, both Muslim countries that previously at one point belonged to India or were part of India. And of course, that goes back further to when India wasn't India, but it was a number of different Rajas. And these Rajas at one point were part of the British Empire when it was British in India. But even before that, there were separate Rajas. They were separate. There's like 100 countries, and maybe even 1,000. It's a lot, and there were big ones, there were kingdoms, there were all sorts of complicated things. But bottom line is that it's essentially a religious war. It's Pakistan Muslim versus India Hindu. And even if Pakistan joined forces with Bangladesh and even southern India, at least the Muslim parts of southern India, they would still not be able to beat India in a war. And they fight on the cricket pitch, refuse to travel to each other. Plus, of course, we had issues with Pakistan for cricket, which I'm not sure how long ago it was, 15, 20 years ago maybe. They had major issues that Imran Khan, former cricket player, became the president or prime minister, sorry, of Pakistan, made everything safe, but then, of course, he was removed from power. So it's still not 100% safe, and it's particularly unsafe for India. Now, the thing is, every other country travelled to Pakistan. They considered it to be safe enough, and they went there. I don't know that there were major concerns from any other country other than India. I'm not aware of them. There were concerns going back 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, but not at the present. It's all been resolved. So, based on that, the first question we've got to ask is: were India's concerns valid, given that every other country travelled to Pakistan? Now, again, historically, India has a different issue with Pakistan to every other country because it's based on war. Australia's never been to war against Pakistan. New Zealand's never been to war. Bangladesh, obviously, they're friends with Pakistan. They would probably side with Pakistan against India if there was a big war to happen. So Bangladesh were fine. Afghanistan were obviously fine. They would probably side with Pakistan as well. There was also a Muslim country. So the situation with India being in close physical proximity and being Hindu and having that historical issue puts them in a different situation to everybody else. Now, had let's say China played, and I know China doesn't have a very good cricket team, but had China played, they may have also been reluctant to travel to Pakistan, although not really the same issue because China has issues with India as well as Pakistan. In fact, I believe it's worse with India. Um, but it was a unique situation. So, in that context, did India have valid concerns? As far as I know, no. That's the simple answer. No, they didn't have valid concerns. Whilst there is that historical context, India has travelled to Pakistan before and been fine. Pakistan has travelled to India and been fine. If it's safe enough for every other country, it is actually safe enough for India. Now, so that situation then puts us in a situation like what we had in the 1996 World Cup, and when Australia and the West Indies refused to travel to Sri Lanka after there was a terrorist bombing there. And Australia and West Indies simply were deducted points. And I know that was a World Cup, or this is a Champions Trophy, but I think it should have been the same result. That had India refused to travel to Pakistan, they should have lost points. Now, they could have been assigned extra security, but I think that as an absolute boycott, they should have been penalised. Now, if that boycott meant every single match, that should have effectively meant that well, there would have been two choices. Either they would be left with 0 points and every team who were meant to play them gets a free points, with no run rate or anything. Or alternatively, they would simply be removed from the competition and replaced by Sri Lanka. And I know a lot of people have said, well, but India bankroll the whole thing. They pay for 70% of revenue. I don't care. This is about cheating, and cricket can't have cheating. So, money is secondary to being a fair game. A lot of people say it's just not cricket, and cricket is known as the fair game. And if you say it's just not cricket, that means it's just not fair. So if that loses its value and dilutes itself because we're saying, well, India can buy wins, then that's a really important factor, and we can't have that. We can't have India just buying wins. So if we allowed India to play in Dubai, which is not close to Pakistan, it's a very long way away, we have two choices. We could either split the competition so it's a dual hosting, not just for India, but for every team, or we could move the whole thing to Dubai. So those are the only two options other than banning or boycotting India. Now, if India said, no, 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 we'll play, fine, they play. But if India say, no, we insist, they cannot just have just India go to Dubai or just India and whoever India play against. It'd have to be a dual hosting arrangement or else Dubai become the hosts. So if we're sure about this and we want to make it fair, but we're giving in to the India, we have to have all the matches in Dubai, or at least in somewhere near there. So perhaps we split the hosting randomly. We can't have it so that India gets this unfair advantage where they play all their matches in Dubai and other countries have to play all but one against in Pakistan because they get used to Pakistan and there's different venues in Pakistan and it's randomized a bit. And there's no clear advantage to any other team playing in Pakistan except for the hosts, and the hosts are meant to get an advantage. And the hosts lost that advantage because they had to travel to Dubai against India. So you're essentially giving India free wins. They're getting a massive advantage because of all the travel, plus also getting used to the conditions in Dubai. And it's all the same ground. It's not even different grounds, it's one ground. Other countries are having to play three or four different grounds in Pakistan and then play that one. And so they're used to Pakistan, they're used to the different conditions, and then they're not used to Dubai and they have to travel a long way, and it's completely unfair. So let's assess whether they could have dually hosted it, dual hosting in Dubai and Pakistan. And the thing is that they're so far away that you couldn't reasonably have done it. They could have done it with Pakistan and Bangladesh, perhaps, or Pakistan and Nepal, maybe. But they would have had to have randomised it. And the problem there is that then India would say, well, what if we get randomised to Pakistan? Well, you couldn't do it. And that becomes a problem because you still can't have India playing all of their matches in one country. For example, you couldn't have India playing all of their matches in, let's say, Bangladesh or Nepal if they'd been dual hosting. So, because it would have been unfair, and they still would have got the boycott issue. And the second issue play all your matches in Dubai or Bangladesh or Nepal or some other country, and strip Pakistan of their hosting rights. And that's clearly not fair on Pakistan, who worked hard to become a safe country. So you couldn't have had that because that'd be unfair to Pakistan. So what is the solution? Well, the solution has to be consistent with what ICC have done in Sri Lanka and other tournaments, which is to issue boycotts if teams refuse to travel to a country. Now, I felt myself that it was unfair in some ways to Australia and West Indies when they refused to travel to Kenya, and I think there was also a refusal to travel to Zimbabwe maybe at one point. Anyway, and I felt it was unfair that they got boycotts when they could have been given extra security. So I think in light of that, we should have given the option of giving extra security to India, and guarantees and so forth. And if India refused to do that, they should have been stripped of points and if they just blatantly refused any possibility, they should have been removed from the tournament. Now, I know a lot of Indians saying, well, that's not fair. We pay for you. Who cares? And that's India didn't create cricket. We've got to be clear here. Cricket was created in England, not India. Cricket existed quite happily and very popular before India became involved. India was not the first team. England was the first team. Then it went to USA and Canada, and the first Test team was Australia, or the second Test team. And of course, after Australia, we did then have West Indies. Oh, sorry, we had South Africa, West Indies, India. Um, and look, India was one of the first teams, but India was not popular in India until at least the 1983 World Cup. And when India famously won, and then it boomed in India. Before that, So 1983 might seem like a long time ago for some people, and it was 42 years ago. If you consider the history of cricket and Test cricket, which is not the only form of cricket, Test cricket has been around for 148 years. So if you consider 43 divided by 148, that's less than a third. So India's only been involved for less than a third of that time. Now, cricket has done quite well without India. And I mean, if India responds to this by saying, "Oh, we don't want to be part of ICC," well, let them go off and be by themselves, and they can run their IPL and invite who they like, and just not participate in global tournaments. And they can do that, and they can see what happens. They see what happened to South Africa when South Africa refused to have, well, when they had apartheid, and they can see what happens. I consider that India's refusal to travel to Pakistan and refusal to take boycotts if they refused to be bullying. And I think that the ICC has to step in and stop that and stop being pandering to it because it is damaging cricket as a whole. Now, I don't know if India would have won a fair tournament. They were one of the better teams. Um, and there is an argument that India would have won. But there's also an argument that even if they would have won anyway, that doesn't absolve them of this cheating. Because this is cheating. And let's just be clear here, they're getting an enormous advantage. And teams haven't complained about that just because they've lost. In fact, they've complained before they've played against India. And then they've lost with that complaint. And we've had people who weren't involved complaining. Now, I mean, if New Zealand come in and win, that doesn't mean that India weren't cheating. Just because India don't win the tournament doesn't mean that they weren't cheating. And if even if they were number one before, and I haven't checked the rankings, that doesn't mean they weren't cheating. They're cheating because they're cheating. And this is in many ways more significant than their ability to dock the pitches, which no other country is allowed to do, and no other country does. And this is a problem. Yes, other countries sometimes mess up their pitches, but they get punished, and you get away with it. And it's a big problem. And we're increasingly having this situation where India's money is allowing them to cheat, and it's creating a scenario where other countries, they play against India for the money, but knowing they're not getting a fair deal. And they're forced to play against India, not allowed to complain because they want the money and they need the money to survive. Now, I'd much rather cricket be poorer and fairer. And I think we need to get to that stage. Look, I'd love for India to play. I love their enthusiasm. I love the fact that it's a large country, the highest population now in the world, and they also love cricket the most. And I'd love them to push in cricket to be the most popular country in the world. That's a wonderful thing, but this is the wrong way to go about it. Bullying other countries and forcing it so that India gets favourable treatment, favourable conditions, and essentially get to win everything is unfair, and it hurts cricket. It hurts cricket in a way that's more, far more significant than simply whether or not they win a minor tournament like the Champions Trophy. Who cares about this? And I don't care as an Australian. I mean, we were without seven of our best players. We were never going to win. We didn't even take it seriously. Um, I don't care about Australia losing. I was surprised that we made it all the way to the semi-finals. I thought we were going to lose to everybody. I thought maybe we'd beat England, but I thought we were going to lose to Afghanistan. And let's be serious here. Australia, I mean, we had washouts. We had a washout against South Africa. We're probably going to lose that. We had a washout against Afghanistan. We're probably going to lose that. We only barely beat South Africa. It's not a surprise that Australia lost to India. India's much better side. They're missing a lot less players. Even with our full strength side, maybe we would have beaten India. I think probably would have, but this wasn't our full strength side. So it wasn't about Australia. Let's just be clear here. And I don't care about the other countries. South Africa always lose semi-finals. India, I mean, New Zealand probably were trying to avoid Australia in the semi-finals. Probably lost on purpose against India. I think, you know, who cares about that? But this travel situation and India getting to play all their matches on the same ground is a massive unfair advantage. And I mean, maybe it wouldn't have made any difference to any of the results. I mean, they always beat Pakistan. So what? They, who else did they beat? They beat Bangladesh. They're not a big deal. Beat India. That was a close match. But look, so they beat New Zealand. I think that New Zealand were probably encouraged to lose, so that they have to face South Africa, who lose every semi-final they ever play, and to avoid Australia. And I think that when we get to this final, this will be the first time that we get a fair match that will be one that could go either way. But even still, I think there's an argument that India on paper are stronger than New Zealand by quite a big margin. So India should win. But that doesn't mean that if New Zealand win that there was no cheating, because there was. Nor does it mean that if India win that there was no cheating because they were a better side. That they're separate issues. You cheat because you cheat, not because of what the result was. And that's the issue. Now, I don't want to see India banned from all cricket. I don't think we're that stage yet, but I think that they need to stop the cheating. And I think that cheating, like we've seen in the Champions Trophy with the venues, is significant. And the argument that India pay for everything and therefore are allowed to cheat is not a valid argument. And I think anyone making that argument needs to stop. And the argument that India didn't gain an advantage is just dishonest. And the argument that India weren't safe, that's the fair argument. That's the one you should be leaning on. But the problem is, if you're not safe, you boycott. You don't participate in the tournament, and that's what should have happened because that's what's happened to every other team. Why is India special that they get to compete and have that different ground when nobody else did? Other teams have had safety issues and they've simply boycotted. They've lost points. They've been disqualified. They've been cancelled. Why is India special? Oh, because they pay for everybody. I don't care if India pay for everybody. I don't care if India bankrolls. That's money centric, and that's not what cricket's about. They can keep their money. They can keep all their money that they give to people. That money's great when it's fair, but that's got to stop being money for wins. It's got to be money because they love cricket. And I'm sure most Indians who would be watching this or paying attention to this situation would agree with me. Most Indian cricket fans love cricket for being fair. Yes, they want their team to win, but they want their team to win fairly. Most Indians do not want India to win because they bought the win. That's not fair, and I don't think that makes anyone happy. If you're going to win, you want to win because you're the best team, not because you've cheated, not because you've manipulated the results. And you also don't want Pakistan, who are your greatest rivalry in cricket, your greatest enemy, to be able to legitimately say that they lost because you cheated. You don't want that to have any credibility. They're going to say it anyway, but you don't want every other team to agree with them. You want to be able to say that when Pakistan say that, they're full of nonsense. And that if other teams say that, they're full of nonsense. You don't want to have them have any legitimacy. So stop cheating, India. Stop it. Be cricket. Follow the game that you all love, and play it fairly. Yes, try to win, but legitimately. And stop this nonsense that you've done in the Champions Trophy. Next time, if you can't agree to the venue, you don't participate. And that's as simple as that. Cut yourself out of the tournament. Maybe Sri Lanka could have played. Would have been fun. Anyway, that's it from me. Bye bye now.